I'm Laura, 34 female. I live in a quiet city, in a modest apartment that I bought with my own savings, and I work as a forensic accountant. For the last 10 years, my life has been a predictable rhythm of numbers, spreadsheets, and the quiet satisfaction of finding truth hidden in financial records. That stability was, I thought, my greatest strength. But it turned out to be the very thing my family used against me. This is the story of how a single, two-word text message in response to my family's betrayal led to their entire world unraveling. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. For as long as I can remember, I was the responsible one. My older brother, Mark, was the charmer, the life of the party, the one who could talk his way out of any trouble. I was the quiet one, the one with her head in a book, the one who balanced her first checkbook at age 12. My parents, Susan and David, praised my diligence, but they adored Mark's charisma. He was the sun they orbited, while I was the reliable, distant moon. My mother, a retired school principal, valued order and results, which I provided. My father, a retired civil engineer, appreciated structure and sound foundations, which I represented. Yet, all their logic seemed to evaporate when Mark was in the room. He was their brilliant, dazzling son who just needed a little more time to find his footing, even at 40 years old. This family dynamic solidified my role early on. When my grandfather passed away, he left my parents a considerable inheritance, including a portfolio of commercial properties and investments. It was a complex estate, far beyond what my parents were equipped to handle. My mother could manage a household budget, and my father could build a bridge, but navigating trusts, tax liabilities, and market fluctuations was a different language. By then, I was in my late 20s, building a career in a field that specialized in untangling exactly these kinds of financial knots. It seemed natural, almost inevitable, that they would turn to me. They established a family trust, a legal entity designed to manage their assets for their benefit and future inheritance, and they named me the sole, uncompensated trustee. Being a trustee is not an honorary title. It's a demanding, legally bound job. It meant I was responsible for everything: collecting rent from commercial tenants, managing the investment portfolio, filing the trust's taxes, and ensuring every single penny was accounted for. For nearly a decade, I did it all without complaint. I spent countless weekends and evenings poring over statements, negotiating with property managers, and consulting with Mr. Albright, the sharp, no-nonsense corporate lawyer who had set up the trust and represented its interests. He was a professional acquaintance, but over the years, I came to respect his meticulous nature. He, in turn, seemed to appreciate mine. My parents loved the arrangement. It gave them a steady, generous income from the trust's profits without any of the headaches. They could travel, renovate their home, and live a comfortable retirement, all while feeling secure that their responsible daughter was at the helm. They never asked about the details. Their questions were always surface level. Is everything okay with the properties? Or, the dividend check was a bit larger this month, that's nice. They didn't want to know about the late-night calls dealing with a burst pipe at a retail property or the hours I spent researching tax law changes to save them thousands. They just wanted the results. I was their perfect, silent, financial engine. Meanwhile, Mark was living a very different life. He bounced from one get-rich-quick scheme to another. He sold questionable supplements, tried day trading with money he didn't have, and was now a car salesman, a job he was surprisingly good at for short periods, usually before his shoddy ethics caught up with him. His life was a constant cycle of financial boom and bust, and during every bust, he'd turn to our parents. They would, in turn, request a distribution from the trust. "Mark just needs a little help to get back on his feet," my mother would say. "It's an investment in his future." I saw it for what it was, throwing good money after bad. As trustee, I had the fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of the trust and its beneficiaries, my parents. Giving Mark large, undocumented sums of money was not in their best interest. I tried to explain this calmly, suggesting structured loans with repayment plans or smaller, more manageable gifts. This was always met with resistance. "Laura, it's our money," my father would say, his voice firm. "We're just telling you what to do with it." Legally, they were right. As the beneficiaries, they could direct me to make distributions, but it created a deep, unspoken tension. I was the gatekeeper they had appointed, and they were beginning to resent the gate. The requests became more frequent. Mark wanted to open his own boutique, used car dealership. He needed a massive capital injection. I advised against it strongly, presenting them with a detailed analysis of Mark's financial history and the high failure rate of such businesses. I showed them, in black and white, that the amount he was asking for would require liquidating a significant portion of their most stable, income-generating stocks, jeopardizing their long-term financial health. "This is reckless," I told them during a tense family dinner. "It puts your retirement at risk." My mother's face tightened. "It's not your job to judge your brother, Laura. It's your job to do what we ask." Mark, sitting across from me, just smirked. He knew he had them. He painted me as the cold, unfeeling numbers cruncher who didn't understand his vision. I was the family killjoy, the sister who was jealous of his ambition. He'd say things like, "Laura doesn't get it, Mom. She plays it safe. You have to take risks to get rewards." My parents, desperate to believe in their golden son, nodded along. Reluctantly, and with a heavy heart, I processed the transfer. I made them sign a formal directive, a document Mr. Albright advised me to create, stating that the distribution was being made against my official recommendation as trustee. It was a small act of self-preservation, a piece of paper that proved I had fulfilled my duties, even if I disagreed with their decision. They signed it without much thought, eager to get the money to Mark. As my father handed the signed paper back to me, he didn't meet my eyes. That was the first time I felt it, a real, tangible crack in the foundation of our family. I was no longer just their responsible daughter, I was an obstacle. The weight of their trust had never felt so heavy, but I was beginning to suspect it wasn't trust at all. It was convenience. And I was about to find out just how quickly convenience could turn into suspicion. The 2 months following the large capital transfer to Mark were eerily quiet. My weekly phone calls with my mother became shorter, her tone clipped and distant. When I asked about Mark's new car dealership, she would give vague, optimistic answers. "He's working very hard," she'd say. "These things take time." My father, who usually loved to chat about his garden or his latest woodworking project, barely spoke at all. It felt like I was being slowly frozen out, relegated to the periphery of the family I had spent a decade serving. I continued my duties as trustee, managing the now-diminished portfolio and ensuring their monthly income remained stable, but the silence from them was deafening. I tried to bridge the gap. I invited them for dinner, but they were always busy. I sent them photos of my weekend hike, a hobby they used to encourage, and received a single thumbs-up emoji in response. It was clear a wall was being built, brick by silent brick, and I was on the wrong side of it. I assumed it was their discomfort over having gone against my advice. Perhaps they felt guilty, or maybe they were just waiting to prove me wrong when Mark's dealership became a roaring success. I decided to give them space, believing that time would mend whatever had been broken. The breaking point didn't come with a phone call or a face-to-face confrontation. It came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in the middle of a complex audit for a client. My phone buzzed on the desk, displaying a message from my mother. I smiled, a small flicker of hope that this might be her reaching out to reconnect. I couldn't have been more wrong. I opened the message. It contained just 4 words, a stark, black-and-white declaration that hit me with the force of a physical blow. It read, "We no longer trust you." I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. The letters seemed to blur together. I read it again, and again. There was no context, no explanation, no "Hi Laura" or "Love, Mom." It was as cold and impersonal as a court summons. It felt unreal, like a message meant for someone else. "We." The word was a sledgehammer. This wasn't just my mother's fleeting frustration. This was a joint decision. My father was in on it. They had discussed it, agreed upon it, and then appointed my mother to deliver the verdict via text message. My first instinct was confusion, followed by a tidal wave of hurt. 10 years. 10 years of meticulous work, of sacrificing my personal time, of navigating complex financial worlds for their benefit, and it all came down to this. A forward dismissal. I thought about calling her, demanding an explanation, but my hand hovered over the call button, trembling. What would I even say? How could I defend myself against an accusation I didn't understand? The message wasn't an invitation for a discussion. It was a final judgment. My mind raced, trying to find a reason. Had I made a mistake? I mentally scrolled through the trust's accounts, the property management reports, the investment statements. No, everything was in perfect order. I was more careful with their money than I was with my own. Every transaction was documented, every decision logged. There was no logical basis for their distrust, which meant the reason had to be illogical. The reason had to be Mark. The full weight of the situation began to settle on me. This wasn't just about my feelings being hurt. This was a direct attack on my integrity and my profession. My role as trustee was built entirely on a foundation of trust. Without it, the entire structure collapsed. They had not only fired me as their daughter, but also as their financial guardian. The cruelty of it was breathtaking, to not even grant me the dignity of a conversation, to reduce a decade of loyalty to a cold, sterile text. I sat there for what felt like an hour, the bustling office around me fading into a dull roar. The hurt began to cool, slowly hardening into something else. It was a cold, quiet anger. An anger born not of passion, but of sheer, disbelieving betrayal. They had used me. They had used my skills, my time, and my love for their own convenience, and the moment I became inconvenient, the moment my professional judgment clashed with their blind faith in my brother, I was discarded. I thought about the years of work, the thousands of hours, the holidays I'd cut short to deal with a tenant issue, the personal investment opportunities I'd passed up because I was too busy managing their portfolio. All of it for nothing, for a family that could throw me away with a casual tap on a phone screen. And what did they expect my response to be? Tears? Begging for forgiveness for a crime I didn't commit? An emotional phone call where they could play the part of the disappointed, long-suffering parents? No, I would not give them that satisfaction. I would not let them see me crumble. They wanted me to be a cold, unfeeling administrator when it suited them, and now they were treating me like one. So be it. My fingers, no longer trembling, moved over my phone's keyboard. I typed a single word in response to their four. It was the only reply that made sense. It was calm, professional, and absolute. It acknowledged their decision without emotion, and in its simplicity, it was devastating. I typed, understood. Then I added one more word, a courtesy they hadn't extended to me. I wrote, understood, resigning. Hit send. As the message delivered, I felt a profound and terrifying sense of finality. It was over. The family I knew, the role I had played for my entire adult life, had been severed. The silence that followed felt different. It was no longer the silence of distance. It was the silence of an ending. And as I sat there, a strange sense of calm washed over me. They had set the terms of our disengagement. I had just formally accepted them. They had no idea what they had just set in motion. They thought they were cutting me off, but all they had really done was cut the safety net that I had so carefully woven beneath them for the last 10 years. And they were about to learn what it felt like to fall. The day after the text message exchange was a study in absolute silence. No follow-up calls, no angry emails, just a void where my family used to be. The finality of my understood. Resigning? Reply hung in the air. It was a promise, and I intended to keep it. The first step was to formalize my resignation as trustee. This wasn't as simple as just walking away. I had a legal and fiduciary duty to ensure a smooth transition. I spent the morning drafting my official resignation letter, citing irreconcilable differences and a loss of confidence from the beneficiaries as the cause. I attached a summary of the trust's current holdings and a recommendation to appoint a corporate trustee from a reputable financial institution. I sent a copy via registered mail to my parents and emailed another to Mr. Albright, the trust's lawyer, informing him of my immediate resignation. Mr. Albright called within the hour. His voice was laced with concern. Laura, I received your email. This is abrupt. Are you sure about this? Is everything all right? I appreciated his professional courtesy, a stark contrast to my own family's behavior. Everything is fine on my end, Mr. Albright. The decision is final. My parents informed me yesterday that they no longer trust me to manage their affairs. I can't, in good conscience, continue in a role that requires absolute trust. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I see, he said, his tone shifting from concern to professional analysis. Well, that is certainly their prerogative. I'll begin the process of finding a suitable successor trustee. This will take some time, Laura. Are you able to manage the day-to-day operations until we have someone in PL? Ace. I will fulfill my basic duties to prevent any immediate harm to the trust, but all strategic decisions are on hold. And I will not be facilitating any further distributions to any party, I said, my voice firm. I'll forward you the complete records and documentation by the end of the week. He agreed, and we ended the call. It was a cold, clinical process, but it was necessary. I was detaching myself piece by piece. The real question, the one that gnawed at me, was why? Why this sudden, complete collapse of trust? The answer, I knew, had to lie with Mark. My opportunity to find out came from an unexpected source. My Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister. Carol was the family's designated observer, always aware of the undercurrents of drama. She called me that evening, her voice a mixture of sympathy and gossip. Laura, honey, I heard what happened, she began. Your mother called me. She was in quite a state. Oh, I'm sure she was, I said, my voice flatter than I intended. She said you were being difficult. That you were, I don't know, trying to control their money, Carol said hesitantly. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Difficult? Aunt Carol, I've spent 10 years managing that money for free, and the only control I ever exerted was advising them not to hand it all over to Mark for his failing business ideas. The last time I was difficult was when I advised against giving him that huge sum for the car dealership. Carol sighed. That's what this is all about, sweetie, the dealership. My blood ran cold. What about it? It's gone, she said quietly. The whole thing, the money you transferred, it's all gone. Mark lost it all in less than 2 months. I felt a dizzying mix of vindication and horror. I knew it was a bad investment, but I never imagined it would implode so quickly and so catastrophically. How? According to your mother, it wasn't his fault, Carol said, the skepticism evident in her voice. Mark told them he was the victim of a scam. He bought a shipment of cars from a wholesaler who disappeared after taking the money. He has no cars, no dealership, and no money left. He's completely broke. It sounded exactly like one of Mark's stories, plausible enough on the surface, but with a distinct lack of personal responsibility. And they believed him. Hook, line, and sinker, Carol confirmed. He went to them last week, crying, saying he was ruined. Susan and David were devastated, of course, not just for the money, but for him, and that's when he started poisoning them against you. My grip on the phone tightened. What did he say? He told them you sabotaged him, Carol explained, her voice low. He claimed that when you processed the transfer, you deliberately put a hold or a flag on the funds. He said this delay meant he missed out on the real deal with a reputable supplier and had to go with a riskier one, which is why he got scammed. He told them you did it out of jealousy, that you never wanted to see him succeed, and that you've always resented him for being their son. I was speechless. The sheer audacity of the lie was stunning. It was a complete fabrication, a desperate attempt to shift the blame for his own incompetence onto me. The transfer had been a standard wire, processed within hours. There were no holds, no flags. It was a clean, straightforward transaction. He didn't stop there, Carol continued, sensing my shock. He told them he'd been looking into things and found irregularities in the trust's accounting. He said it looked like you were hiding money from them, moving it into accounts they couldn't see. He suggested you were paying yourself a secret salary, or maybe even skimming off the top. He told them that's why you were so resistant to giving him the money, not because you were protecting them, but because you were protecting your own secret slush fund. The accusation was so vile, so far from the truth, that it made me feel nauseous. He was accusing me of a felony. He had used my meticulous, complex work against me, twisting my professionalism into a narrative of deceit. My parents, who wouldn't know a balance sheet from a grocery list, would have no way of disputing it. To them, the complex trusts and investment vehicles I'd set up to protect their assets would just look like a confusing web of accounts, a perfect place to hide something. It all clicked into place. Mark's failure, his shame, and his desperation had curdled into a vicious, calculated attack. He couldn't face our parents as a failure, so he had to create a villain, and I was the perfect candidate. I was the one who had warned them, the one who controlled the money, the one who understood the numbers they didn't. He had poisoned them against me to save himself. And they, in their blind adoration for their golden boy, had drunk every last drop. The text message wasn't just a dismissal, it was an accusation. "We no longer trust you," meant, "We think you are a thief." A cold, hard clarity washed over me. The hurt I had felt was replaced by a steely resolve. This was no longer just a family squabble. My brother had libeled me and attacked my professional reputation. My parents had chosen to believe him without a single question, without even the courtesy of asking for my side of the story. They had convicted and sentenced me based on the lies of a desperate man. "Thank you for telling me, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice steady. "I appreciate you being honest with me." "Of course, honey, I'm so sorry. They're not thinking straight." "No," I replied, a new chilling sense of purpose in my voice. "They made their choice. They chose to trust him. Now they can live with that choice." After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. They thought I was a thief. They thought I had betrayed them. They had sided with the person who had set a torch to their life savings and then blamed the smoke on me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just the responsible daughter. I was a forensic accountant. My entire career was built on one simple principle: follow the money. And I was about to audit my own family. Mark wanted to paint me as a criminal? Fine. I would show them what a real investigation looked like. The days following my conversation with Aunt Carol were fueled by a cold, precise rage. The emotional sting of my family's betrayal was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a singular, professional focus. Mark had accused me of financial misconduct. My parents had believed him. It was an attack not just on my character, but on the very essence of my career and my identity. I wasn't going to let that stand. I wasn't going to get into a shouting match or a he said, she said argument. I was going to respond in the only language I knew, the indisputable language of numbers. I was going to conduct a full forensic audit of the family trust and, more specifically, of every dollar that had ever passed into my brother's hands. I had 10 years of meticulous records at my fingertips. As trustee, I had documented everything, every transaction, every communication, every decision. I had digital copies of every bank statement, investment report, tax filing, and property management invoice. It was a mountain of data that would have been impenetrable to a layperson, but to me, it was a roadmap. My apartment transformed into a command center. I set up a second monitor, pulled out my archive of files, and started digging. My objective was twofold. First, to create an unassailable record of my own integrity, proving that every penny was accounted for. Second, to trace the money given to Mark and expose the truth of his scam. The first part was straightforward, if tedious. I spent 2 days building a comprehensive report. I created flowcharts that tracked every dollar of income from the rental properties and investments. I compiled a ledger that detailed every single expense, from property taxes and maintenance fees to the distributions made to my parents. I highlighted the sections of the trust agreement that outlined my duties and limitations. I cross-referenced everything with the official bank statements. The result was a thick, meticulously organized binder that proved, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that not only had I not stolen anything, but my management had consistently outperformed market averages, growing my parents' net worth significantly over the decade. It was a monument to my diligence. The second part of the audit was the real investigation. I focused on the massive transfer for Mark's car dealership. I had the wire transfer confirmation, which showed the exact date, time, and receiving account number. Mark's story was that a scammer had run off with the money. If that were true, there would be a clear trail. The money would go into an account and then likely be moved offshore or withdrawn in cash quickly. But a good car salesman is often a good liar. And good liars know that the best lies are wrapped around a kernel of truth. I started with the receiving account. It wasn't in the name of a wholesaler or a shell corporation. It was a business account, but it was under a name I recognized. Mark Enterprises, LLC. It was one of my brother's many failed ventures, a limited liability company he had set up years ago. Curious. If he was paying a supplier, why would the money go into his own business account first? From there, I began to trace the outflows. There was no single, large transaction to a supposed wholesaler. Instead, the money had flowed out in a chaotic torrent of smaller payments. I saw huge payments to high-end clothing stores, a luxury watch retailer, and several upscale restaurants. There was a down payment on a flashy sports car, in his personal name, not the business's. Thousands of dollars had been withdrawn from ATMs located near casinos in 2 different neighboring states. He wasn't scammed, he had taken our parents' retirement money and gone on the spending spree of a lifetime. But that still didn't account for all of it. A significant chunk, nearly half of the total amount, had been transferred to a third-party payment processor, one commonly used for online gambling and high-risk investments. He hadn't just been spending lavishly, he'd been gambling. He'd thrown it away on poker sites and risky stock options, chasing a bigger win to cover his tracks. The scam was a lie he'd invented after he'd lost everything. The most damning piece of evidence came when I cross-referenced the dates of his ATM withdrawals with his social media. While he was telling our parents, he was negotiating with suppliers. His Instagram told a different story. He had posted pictures of himself on a spontaneous boys' trip to Las Vegas, complete with champagne bottles and casino chips. He'd backdated the posts to make them look older, but the digital timestamp on the original files, something a forensic analyst can easily retrieve, told the real story. He was partying with my parents, money on the very week he was supposed to be building his business. As I pieced it all together, my anger solidified into a cold, hard certainty. This was more than just irresponsible behavior. It was a deliberate, calculated fraud perpetrated against his own family. And the lie about me sabotaging the transfer was the final, vicious twist of the knife, designed to make me the villain in his pathetic tragedy. By the end of the week, I had a second binder. This one was thinner, but its contents were explosive. It contained a detailed timeline of Mark's spending, copies of his bank statements showing the extravagant purchases and gambling transactions, screenshots of his social media posts with the original timestamps exposed, and a concluding summary that laid out the stark, undeniable truth. He hadn't been scammed. He was the scammer. I now held 2 powerful weapons. The first was a perfect defense of my own honor. The second was a devastating indictment of my brother's character. The question was what to do with them. Part of me wanted to drive to my parents' house, throw the binders on their dining room table, and watch their faces as the reality of their son's betrayal crashed down on them. But what would that accomplish? They would get defensive. Mark would spin more lies. It would become another messy, emotional family drama. They had made their decision based on lies and emotion. I would force them to confront the consequences based on facts and logic. They had chosen to end our relationship in a cold, professional manner. So my response would also be professional. I wouldn't scream or cry. I would simply comply. I had already sent my resignation. Now I would take the next logical step. They didn't trust me. Understood. From this moment on, I would do absolutely nothing for them. I would let the systems I had so carefully managed grind to a halt. They had fired their guardian, and now they were going to find out what it was like to be unprotected. The audit was complete. The evidence was secured. The next phase of my plan was about to begin, and it was beautifully, terrifyingly simple. My one-word reply, understood, was not just an acknowledgement, it was the activation of a protocol. I call it the understood protocol. It's a strategy of malicious compliance, where you agree to the stated terms so completely and literally that the person making the demand is forced to face the unintended, disastrous consequences of their own request. My parents had stated their position. We no longer trust you. My response accepted that premise as the new foundation of our relationship. If they didn't trust me, then I could no longer act on their behalf in any capacity. My involvement, my expertise, my silent, thankless labor, all of it would cease immediately. The first, most critical step was my formal resignation as trustee, which I had already set in motion. But my role in their lives extended far beyond that official title. I was their default tech support, their financial advisor, their medical advocate, and their general life administrator. All of that was about to end. I went through my digital life and systematically severed every connection. I removed myself from their shared cloud storage, where I kept organized copies of their important documents. I deleted the calendar reminders for their property tax payments and insurance renewals. I removed my name as the secondary contact on their utility accounts and their home security system. I even logged out of their streaming service accounts, which I had set up and paid for as a small gift years ago. Each click of the mouse was a quiet severing of a tie, a removal of a safety net they didn't even know existed. They had handed me my freedom on a silver platter. For the first time in a decade, my weekends were entirely my own. I didn't spend Saturday poring over spreadsheets. I went. For a long hike in the mountains. I didn't spend Sunday evening preparing tax documents. I met friends for dinner. A huge weight I hadn't even been fully conscious of was lifted from my shoulders. The silence from my family continued, and I embraced it. I blocked their numbers, not out of spite, but as a preventative measure. I would not be drawn into frantic, last-minute pleas for help. They had made their bed, and my compliance meant I was simply tucking them into it. The first domino was a small one. About a week after the text, I received an automated email notification that the quarterly pest control service for one of their rental properties had been canceled. The reason? The credit card on file had expired. It was my credit card. I had set it up years ago to pay for recurring maintenance expenses, which I would then reimburse myself for from the trust. A system that was easier than constantly processing small claims. I had, of course, canceled that card. I read the email and then archived it without taking any action. It wasn't my problem anymore. A few days later, a more significant domino fell. The company that managed the trust's stock portfolio sent an automated alert. There had been a margin call on a portion of their investments. It was a technical issue, a result of some market volatility, and required an immediate decision: either deposit more funds or liquidate a portion of the holdings to cover the call. Normally, I would have received this alert, analyzed the market, and made a strategic decision within minutes. But my access to the accounts was now restricted, pending the appointment of a new trustee. The alerts were being forwarded to the primary email on the account, my father's. I knew for a fact he rarely checked it and wouldn't understand what a margin call was even if he did. The deadline for a response was 24 hours. I watched the clock tick down, feeling a strange detachment. This was the natural consequence of an unmanaged portfolio. The most significant part of my protocol involved the properties. The family trust owned 3 commercial buildings. As trustee, I managed them through a professional property management company. However, the company's contract was with the trust, and I was their sole point of contact. My resignation triggered a clause in our agreement. In the event of a change in trustee, all non-emergency actions required direct approval from the new trustee. Without a trustee in place, the management company's hands were tied. They could collect rent, but they couldn't authorize repairs, negotiate lease renewals, or deal with tenant complaints. I knew that one of the properties, a building housing a popular restaurant, had its lease up for renewal at the end of the month. The restaurant owner was eager to sign a new 5-year lease with a generous rent increase. It was a crucial piece of income for the trust. The property manager had emailed me the documents for review 2 weeks prior. I had, of course, not responded. My duty was to the trust, but the trust was currently headless. Without my signature, or the signature of a new trustee, that lease would expire. The restaurant, legally, would have to vacate. The beauty of the understood protocol was its passivity. I wasn't doing anything to them. I wasn't seeking revenge in an active sense. I was simply doing nothing. I was honoring their stated position. They didn't trust me, so I was no longer acting. Every looming disaster, the expired lease, the unanswered margin call, the canceled services, was a direct result of their own declaration. They had taken a complex, finely tuned machine that I kept running smoothly and had ripped the operator out of the driver's seat. Now, the machine was just coasting on momentum, and it was about to run out of road. I spent my time focusing on my actual job, feeling more productive and clear-headed than I had in years. I even took on a challenging new case that required all my attention. My life was moving forward, while theirs, I suspected, was about to grind to a spectacular halt. I kept the 2 binders, my audit of the trust and my investigation into Mark, on a shelf in my home office. They were my insurance policy. I had a feeling I wouldn't have to wait long before someone came asking for the help I was no longer authorized to give. The silence from my family was the sound of a bomb's timer counting down, and my finger was nowhere near the off switch. They had lit the fuse themselves. It was exactly 2 weeks and 2 days after my mother's text message. I was at my desk, finalizing a report for a client, when my work phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but the area code was local. I answered with my standard professional greeting. "Am I speaking with Laura?" The voice was strained, formal, and laced with an undercurrent of panic. I recognized it instantly. It was Mr. Albright, the trust's lawyer. "This is she," I replied calmly. "Laura, thank God," he said, the relief in his voice palpable. "I've been trying to reach your parents for 3 days. I've left messages on their home phone, their cell phones, I've even sent emails. I've received no response." I remained silent, letting him continue. This was it, the first tremors of the earthquake they had triggered. "Laura, we have a number of critical, time-sensitive issues," he said, his voice quickening. "The investment firm has been contacting me nonstop. There was a margin call last week that went unanswered. As a result, they were forced to liquidate a substantial portion of the portfolio at a significant loss to cover the position. We're talking about a 6-figure loss, Laura." I felt a flicker of grim satisfaction, but kept my voice neutral. "I see, that's unfortunate." "Unfortunate? It's a disaster," he exclaimed, his professional composure cracking. "And that's not the half of it. I was just contacted by the attorney for the restaurant that leases the downtown property. Their lease expired yesterday. The property manager told them they had no instructions on renewal, so the restaurant owner has triggered their exit clause and is vacating the premises. He's found a new location. That's the trust's most profitable tenant gone. Do you have any idea what the loss of that rental income will do to your parents' cash flow?" "I imagine it would be catastrophic," I said, my tone as placid as if we were discussing the weather. There was a frustrated silence on the other end of the line. "Laura, what is going on?" he finally asked, his voice dropping. "Your parents haven't signed any of the documents to appoint a new trustee. I sent them a list of highly qualified corporate trust managers, and they haven't responded. The trust is effectively paralyzed. Bills are going unpaid. I received a notice about a lapsed insurance policy on one of the buildings. If there's a fire, they will have 0 coverage. Why are they not responding to me?" Here was my moment. I could have feigned ignorance, but transparency was far more powerful. "Mr. Albright," I said, my voice clear and steady. 2 weeks ago, my parents sent me a message informing me that they no longer trust me. I responded by immediately tendering my resignation as trustee. I did this via registered mail and copied you on the email. My compliance with their stated position is absolute. Since I am no longer trusted, I am no longer involved. I have not spoken to them since that day. The lawyer was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. When he spoke again, his voice was completely different. The panic was gone, replaced by a tone of dawning, horrified understanding. "They fired you? Via text message." "That is correct," I confirmed. "And you've just stepped away." "I have, as is my legal and ethical obligation. I cannot act as a fiduciary for individuals who have explicitly stated they have no confidence in me. To do so would be a massive liability for both myself and the trust." He let out a long, slow breath that was heavy with resignation. "I see. I understand completely. From a legal standpoint, you have done everything correctly. You notified all parties and have ceased actions. But from a practical standpoint, Laura, your parents are not capable of managing this. I don't think they comprehend what the role of trustee actually entails. I think they believed it was like firing a gardener. They didn't realize they were firing the pilot of the airplane while it was in mid-flight." "That is their problem, not mine," I stated, the coldness in my voice surprising even myself. "I provided them with a decade of flawless, uncompensated service. They repaid that service by believing baseless, slanderous accusations against me and dismissing me without a conversation. The consequences of that decision are now theirs to manage." "Accusations?" Mr. Albright's lawyerly instincts kicked in. "What accusations?" "That is a family matter," I said, cutting off that line of inquiry. "For now, my only concern is the legal and formal transition of my former duties. Have they given you any indication of who they want to manage their affairs?" "No," he said, sounding utterly defeated. "They seem to be under the impression that their son, Mark, can handle it." I almost laughed. "Mark? Mr. Albright, Mark is the reason they are in this mess. He is financially illiterate and has a proven track record of catastrophic failure. Giving him any control over the trust would be like putting an arsonist in charge of the fire department." "I am aware of Mark's history," the lawyer sighed, "which is why I am in such a panic. Laura, they need you. They might not know it yet, but they are heading for total financial ruin. The income they rely on to live is about to be slashed by more than half. Their net worth has already taken a massive hit. Can't you just talk to them?" It was the plea of a desperate man trying to contain a crisis, but the time for talking was long past. "Isn't?" "No," I said, the single word carrying all the weight of the last 2 weeks. "I cannot. My position is unchanged. I will forward you the binders I've prepared. One contains a full accounting of my 10 years as trustee, proving my impeccable record. The other contains a forensic investigation into the funds recently distributed to my brother. I believe you will find it illuminating. It should clarify exactly why my parents suddenly lost trust in me. After you review them, you will understand why my involvement is permanently concluded. Please direct all future correspondence to your office. I will no longer be taking calls regarding this matter." Before he could respond, I ended the call. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding. It was done. The reality of their situation was no longer a theoretical problem, but a frantic, unfolding disaster being screamed down a phone line by their own lawyer. They had wanted me gone. They had gotten their wish. And the bill for that wish was finally coming due. The day after my call with Mr. Albright, I couriered the 2 binders to his office. I included a simple cover letter. As discussed, please find enclosed a final accounting of my tenure as trustee and a supplemental report for your review. My resignation is final. I felt a sense of release as the courier left my apartment. The evidence was no longer just mine. It was in the hands of a legal professional who was obligated to act in the best interest of the trust. 2 days later, my phone started ringing. Blocked numbers one after another. Then came the voicemails. The first was from my mother. Her voice, usually so composed and authoritative, was cracking with a desperate, unfamiliar hysteria. "Laura, you need to call us back. Mr. Albright was just here. He showed us papers. There's been a terrible mistake. We need you to fix this. The restaurant, the stocks, Laura, please, your father is beside himself." The second voicemail was from my father. It was short, guttural. Laura, we messed up, your brother, he lied. We know that now, just call us. We can sort this out. The third was from Mark. His tone was a snarling, panicked rage. What did you do? You ruined me. You went to Mom and Dad with those lies. You've always been jealous. You'll pay for this. I listened to all 3 messages once, then deleted them. I did not reply. My understood protocol was still in effect. Their panic, their regret, their anger, it was all part of the fallout from a bomb they themselves had built. I was simply a spectator, watching from a safe distance. The full story came to me once again through my Aunt Carol. She called me a week later, her voice somber. Mr. Albright, after reviewing my binders, had scheduled an emergency meeting with my parents. He had walked them through my first binder, page by page, showing them the decade of meticulous work and the significant growth of their wealth under my stewardship. Then, he had opened the second binder. He showed them the bank statements detailing Mark's spending spree. He showed them the ATM withdrawals from casinos. He showed them the verified timestamps on the social media posts from his Vegas trip. He showed them the irrefutable proof that their golden son had not been scammed, but had burned through their life savings on luxury goods and gambling. According to Carol, my mother broke down completely. My father just sat there, white as a sheet, staring at the evidence of his son's betrayal and his own catastrophic failure of judgment. They had been so easily manipulated, so eager to believe the worst of the daughter who had only ever helped them, and the best of the son who had only ever hurt them. The "we no longer trust you" message was not just an insult to me. It was a testament to their own foolishness, now laid bare in a lawyer's conference room. The aftermath was brutal. My parents were forced to appoint a corporate trustee from a bank who charged a hefty annual fee for their services, a fee that further drained their now crippled income. They had to sell one of the smaller properties at a loss to cover their debts and create a cash buffer. Their comfortable retirement was over. They were now on a strict, unforgiving budget, managed by an impersonal stranger at a bank. They tried to reach me again, sending long, rambling emails full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. I created a filter to send them directly to a folder I never opened. As for Mark, his life imploded. When my parents confronted him, he didn't even try to deny it. He simply packed a bag and left. Last I heard, he was living with a friend 2 states away, back to selling cars, his relationship with our parents completely shattered. They had given him everything, including their trust and their relationship with me, and he had squandered it all. Months have passed. The silence that once felt heavy and painful now feels peaceful. I've excelled at work, received a promotion, and started dating someone who values my intelligence and stability. My life is my own, unburdened by the thankless weight of my family's expectations and poor decisions. A few weeks ago, I received a formal letter from Mr. Albright. It was a final closing statement on the transfer of the trusteeship, but he had included a personal, handwritten note at the bottom. It read, "Laura, in 30 years of practicing law, I have never seen such a case of swift, deserved, and self-inflicted consequence. You acted with more integrity than they ever deserved. I wish you all the best." I keep that note on my desk. It's a reminder that my revenge wasn't an act of aggression, but an act of stillness. I didn't destroy my family. I simply stepped aside and let them reap what they had sown. I let their own choices bring their world crashing down. I responded to their declaration of distrust with absolute acceptance, and in doing so, I closed the ledger on that chapter of my life. They no longer trusted me. I understood. And in the end, that was the most powerful thing I could have ever said.